Hey friends, just quickly asking you to hit the notification bell and the like and subscribe buttons before we start. Also, don't forget to leave a comment saying where you're watching from, or just drop a quick, I'm doing my part. In the vast, dusty annals of human history, few figures have commanded the world's attention quite like Alexander III of Macedon. His life was a supernova of conquest that reshaped the geopolitical landscape of antiquity, fusing the Hellenic and Persian worlds into a new cultural epoch. Yet it is his death, and specifically the fate of his mortal remains, that has generated a mystery enduring for over 2 millennia. The disappearance of Alexander's body and tomb is a gripping narrative of political legitimacy and divine sanction to rule. To possess the body of Alexander was, in the fractured world of his contentious successors, a powerful symbol. Its location was once common knowledge, a landmark as defining as the Pharos Lighthouse or the Great Library. But today it's a phantom lost to time, a source of endless speculation. Tutored by Aristotle and hardened by his father Philip II, he ascended the throne at 20 and spent the next 12 years marching east undefeated. He was a man who slept with a copy of the Iliad and a dagger under his pillow, viewing himself as a new Achilles. His personality was a volatile cocktail of paranoia, genius, and generosity, capable of massacring the population of Tyre one day and weeping over the body of a fallen enemy the next. By the time of his death in Babylon, in 323 BC, Alexander had begun to transcend mere kingship. Following his pilgrimage to the Oracle of Siwa in 332 BC, he had been hailed as the son of Ammon, a demigod walking among mortals. This belief in his own divinity fundamentally altered the political landscape. He was no longer just a Macedonian warlord, he was a deity sent to walk upon the earth. Consequently, his body wasn't just decaying biological matter, it was a divine totem with real-world power. The possession of this artifact became the first and most dangerous game played by the generals he left behind, a game that would tear his empire apart and launch the Hellenistic Age. Following Alexander's death in Babylon in June 323 BC, the Macedonian Empire instantly fractured. The king died without a clear heir, leaving his generals, the marshals of the Macedonian army, to carve up his conquests. In this vacuum of power, the corpse of the king became a talisman of immense political weight. Perdiccas, regent of the empire, sought to maintain the unity of Alexander's realm. His plan was to return the body to the ancestral burial ground of the Argead dynasty in Macedonia. By burying Alexander with his fathers, Perdiccas intended to cement the continuity of the royal line, over which he held sway. However, ancient tradition and the specific desires of Alexander complicated this plan. According to the historian Quintus Curtius Rufus, Alexander had explicitly requested to be interred not in Macedonia, but in the Siwa oasis in the Libyan desert, at the temple of Zeus Ammon. This request was born of his pilgrimage there, where the oracle had reportedly confirmed his divinity. Alexander viewed himself not merely as the son of Philip II, but as a demigod, and he wished to rest alongside his divine father in the Egyptian sands rather than the Macedonian soil. While the generals bickered, the body was prepared for a journey of unprecedented grandeur. It took 2 years to construct the funerary cart that would transport the king. The description provided by Diodorus Siculus, likely based on the eyewitness testimony of Hieronymus of Cardia, paints a picture of a vehicle designed to awe everyone. It was a mobile temple, a piece of propaganda on wheels that projected the infinite wealth and power of the deceased. The carriage featured a vaulted chamber approximately 12 by 18 feet in size, covered in scales of gold set with precious stones. This shimmering canopy was supported by Ionic columns, forming an open peristyle that allowed the golden sarcophagus inside to be visible to the awestruck crowds lining the road. 4 golden Nike statues stood at the corners, each carrying a trophy, while the base of the carriage was adorned with paintings depicting Alexander's military triumphs. To ensure the procession was heard before it was seen, a system of bells was suspended from the roof, designed to create a continuous, rhythmic tolling that added an auditory dimension. Drawn by 64 mules, each adorned with a gilded crown and bells, the entire contraption was designed to thunder across the landscape like a storm of gold. In late 321 BC, the procession finally departed Babylon, ostensibly heading west toward the Mediterranean coast to begin the journey to Macedonia. However, Ptolemy Soter, the governor of Egypt, had other plans. He understood that burying Alexander in Macedonia would strengthen Perdiccas. Burying him in Egypt, however, would legitimize Ptolemy's own separatist ambitions to establish an independent kingdom. Ptolemy colluded with Aridaeus, the general in charge of the funeral escort. As the procession reached Syria, near the border of Ptolemy's territory, the cart was hijacked. Instead of turning north toward Anatolia and Macedonia, it was diverted south toward Egypt. Perdiccas, stationed in Pisidia, was enraged. He launched an invasion of Egypt to reclaim the body and punish the insubordinate satrap, sparking the First War of the Successors. The invasion was a disaster. Perdiccas failed to cross the Nile, lost the support of his troops, and was assassinated by his own officers. Ptolemy had won. The body was his, and with it, the legitimacy of his own new dynasty. Ptolemy didn't immediately bring Alexander to the city that bore his name. Alexandria was still under construction, a vast building site of limestone and dust. Instead, Ptolemy interred the body in Memphis, the ancient capital of the pharaohs. This was a calculated move to associate Alexander with the traditional pharaonic lineage. It's highly probable that during this period Alexander's body was placed in the vacant sarcophagus of Nectanebo II, the last native pharaoh of Egypt. Nectanebo had fled Egypt in the face of a Persian invasion, leaving his prepared tomb empty. Utilizing this sarcophagus would have been a potent symbolic gesture, portraying Alexander as the legitimate successor to the pharaohs and the avenger who expelled the Persians. Sometime in the late 4th or early 3rd century BC, sources differ on whether it was under Ptolemy I or his son Ptolemy II. The body was transferred to Alexandria. Later, Ptolemy IV constructed a grand communal mausoleum for Alexander and the Ptolemaic ancestors. This structure was known as the Soma, Greek for body, and it was located in the royal quarter, likely at the intersection of the city's 2 main thoroughfares. The tomb became the spiritual center of the Ptolemaic dynastic cult, where Alexander was worshipped as a god. The original coffin was of hammered gold, fitted to the body like a mummy case. However, the immense wealth of the tomb made it a target even for its guardians. In 89 BC, Ptolemy X, facing a fiscal crisis and civil war, melted down the golden sarcophagus to pay his mercenaries. He then replaced it with a sarcophagus of glass or transparent alabaster. This desecration was viewed with horror by the populace and was seen as a harbinger of the dynasty's fall. With the fall of Cleopatra VII and the annexation of Egypt by Rome in 30 BC, the Soma became a site of pilgrimage for the new masters of the world. The Roman emperors, who sought to emulate Alexander's military genius, treated the tomb with a mix of reverence and appropriation. Julius Caesar paid his respects in 48 BC following his victory over Pompey. Here he famously lamented what a loser he was compared to Alexander, and how he felt like he hadn't really accomplished all that much. Decades later, in 30 BC, Augustus viewed the body and placed a golden crown and flowers upon it. The reverence turned weird under Caligula, who, according to Suetonius, ordered the armor taken from the tomb to wear for his own divine cosplay in Rome. In 200, Septimius Severus ordered the tomb sealed to the public and placed sacred books of magic within it to protect its secrets. The last recorded imperial visit came in 215 AD with Caracalla. Fancying himself Alexander Reborn, he removed his tunic, ring, and belt, placing them on the coffin as a tribute. Disturbingly, he would later massacre the Alexandrian populace in a fit of paranoia, sparked by their mockery of his obsession. And with that massacre, Caracalla forever proved that he was a reasonable person and ruler. These visits confirmed that the tomb was intact and identified at least until the early 3rd century. After that, things were going to start to get quite murky. The disappearance of the tomb is not marked by a single recorded event, but rather by a fade into silence. By the end of the 4th century AD, the location was unknown. St. John Chrysostom, writing around 400 AD, posed the rhetorical question, asking where the tomb of Alexander was. This implies that by then, even the locals had lost the knowledge of its specific site. Between Caracalla's visit and Chrysostom's sermon writing, a convergence of 3 catastrophic forces provided significant instability: natural disaster, civil strife, and religious purging. On July 21st, 365, a massive earthquake, estimated at magnitude 8.0 or higher, struck off the coast of Crete. The resulting tsunami devastated the eastern Mediterranean. In Alexandria, the sea receded before returning as a wall of water that crashed over the royal quarter. Ships were stranded on rooftops, and the solid earth shook violently. This event likely caused significant subsidence in the harbor area, submerging parts of the royal quarter, or burying them under centuries of silt and debris. If nature began the destruction, religious zealotry finished it. In 391 AD, Emperor Theodosius issued decrees banning paganism. The Patriarch Theophilus led a mob to destroy the Serapeum, the massive temple of Serapis. Given that Alexander was worshipped as a god, it seems highly unlikely that the Soma would have been spared during this purge. In the vacuum of the tomb's disappearance, a compelling theory has emerged, championed by a physics professor turned Alexander enthusiast named Andrew Chugg. It posits that the body of Alexander wasn't destroyed, but was instead rebranded. The theory rests on a striking chronological coincidence. The tomb of Alexander disappears from the historical record at the exact same time that the tomb of St. Mark the Evangelist suddenly appears in Alexandria. St. Mark was martyred in Alexandria in the year 68, and tradition held that his body was burned. However, later church traditions claimed the body was miraculously saved. It's been argued that during the anti-pagan purges of Theodosius, the guardians of Alexander's corpse may have disguised the mummy as St. Mark to protect it. By labeling the God King as a Christian saint, they ensured his survival in a Christian empire. The narrative continues into the 9th century. In 828, 2 Venetian merchants, Buno of Malamocco and Rustico of Torcello, arrived in Alexandria. Seeking a powerful relic to elevate the status of Venice, they conspired to steal the body of St. Mark from its church. According to the Venetian Chronicle, they smuggled the corpse past Muslim customs officials by covering it in layers of pork and cabbage. According to tradition, the 2 Venetians told the devout guards that they were free to inspect their massive heaping pile of pork to their heart's content. The Muslim guards decided to skip out on a thorough inspection, and the corpse was removed from the city. The body was sailed to Venice and interred in the Basilica di San Marco, where it remains today. if Chug's theory is correct, the millions of pilgrims who have venerated St. Mark are, in fact, bowing before Alexander the Great. The strongest physical evidence for this theory lies in a stone block embedded in the foundations of the basilica in Venice. Known as the Star Shield block, it features a relief carving of a Macedonian shield with a starburst emblem and a spear. Art historical analysis suggests the carving is undeniably Hellenistic Macedonian, dating to the 3rd century BC. Furthermore, measurements reveal that its dimensions perfectly match the missing outer casing of the Necta Nebo, the second sarcophagus, which is currently held in the British Museum. Personally, this is the theory that I want to be true, since it would be one of the most bizarre historical twists ever, but I can't present it uncritically. This theory, while obviously intriguing, requires more concrete archaeological evidence to be fully accepted by the scholarly community. Critics point out that the transmission of the Star Shield block from Egypt to Venice lacks thorough historical documentation. Further, some argue that the artistic motifs, though Macedonian, could have been transported independently of Alexander's remains. Historians have noted that for a large portion of its history, Venice controlled significant outposts in Greece. Another theory was proposed in 2024 by Egyptologist Christian de Vardavan. He suggests that Alexander's body may have been moved from Alexandria to the eastern desert of Egypt to protect it from destruction during the tumultuous periods of late antiquity. He notes that after the Muslim conquest of Egypt, there arose a tradition that Alexander was actually a particularly holy figure who was acting through the will of God. Under this theory, it's believed that these Alexander fans may have taken his body out to a site in the desert where it would be safe from religious zealotry. Notably, though, this argument is entirely circumstantial, though it is possible that future literary discoveries may shed further light on the theory. The most scientifically rigorous search currently underway is led by Calliope Limnaeos Papacosta in the Shalalat Gardens of Alexandria. This public park sits directly atop the ancient royal quarter. This location adheres to the standard historical consensus that the Soma was in the city center. Papacosta's team faces immense engineering challenges as the water table in Alexandria has risen significantly since antiquity, submerging the Ptolemaic strata. Using extensive pumping systems, she has uncovered massive foundation blocks of a public building extending over 200 feet, identified as part of the royal complex. They also discovered a marble statue of Alexander the Great, dating to the Hellenistic period. In 2018, discouraged and ready to quit, the discovery of a pristine white marble hand revitalized the project. Her working theory is that the tomb may have been buried or hidden deep within the royal quarter to protect it from later Christian or Muslim zealots. Under this theory, it resides in the bedrock layers currently threatened by groundwater. The search for Alexander isn't limited to the land. The topography of Alexandria has changed drastically due to subsidence and the tsunami in 365. This means a significant portion of the ancient royal quarter is now underwater in the eastern harbor. Notably, the entrance to a monumental mausoleum has been found in that area, proving that this was an area used for those purposes. This supports the hypothesis that the Soma, or parts of it, may have been claimed by the Mediterranean, scattered among the submerged ruins of the palaces. In the end, the remains of one of history's greatest figures, who molded the entire world around him, remains an unsolved mystery. Hey everyone, Jimmy here with a quick reminder to hit the notification bell and drop a comment if you haven't done so already. If you've spent any time online, you know that for a large portion of the population, the cat reigns supreme. It's a creature of memes, a furry companion sleeping on our keyboards, a domestic overlord demanding tribute in the form of treats. But this modern, pampered pet is the descendant of an animal that held a far more complex and paradoxical status in the ancient world. In the land of the pharaohs, the cat wasn't just a pet, it was a pest controller, a divine symbol, a cherished family member, and a legally protected citizen. In a strange and dark twist, the beloved feline was also a mass-produced commodity for the afterlife. The story of the cat in ancient Egypt is a journey from utilitarian hunter to holy icon, and it reveals the profound complexities of Egyptian society, religion, and commerce. It's a common belief that the Egyptians were the first to domesticate the cat, but the story actually begins elsewhere. The first steps toward the partnership between human and feline were taken not along the Nile, but in the Fertile Crescent of the Near East, around 10,000 years ago. As early humans transitioned from nomadic life to settled agriculture, they created a new kind of ecosystem. Their granaries, overflowing with the bounty of the harvest, became a paradise for rodents. This, in turn, attracted a stealthy, efficient predator, the local wildcat, known as Felis silvestris libica. Unlike dogs, which were likely actively domesticated by humans, cats seem to have domesticated themselves. They were drawn to human settlements by the promise of an easy meal, and early farmers quickly recognized their value. These felines were a living, purring form of pest control, protecting the vital food stores that were the very foundation of civilization. A mutually beneficial alliance was formed. Humans offered scraps and a degree of safety, and in return, the cats kept the granaries clear of vermin. But they did more than just hunt mice. In a land where venomous snakes and scorpions were a constant household threat, the cat was also a formidable protector. Its practical value was immediately apparent in the agrarian society of the Nile Valley. Early artistic evidence confirms this role. A tomb fresco from the 21st century BC shows a cat confronting a rodent, a clear celebration of its pest control prowess. Because cats entered human society on their own terms, retaining their independence and mysterious nature, they were never seen as mere servants. They were powerful, autonomous allies, and this perception of agency would become the bedrock for their incredible ascent to divinity. The cat's journey from the granary to the temple was a gradual one, built upon admiration for its unique qualities. The Egyptians saw in the cat a creature of compelling duality. It was a fierce hunter, yet a gentle, nurturing mother. It was elegant and graceful, yet capable of sudden, lethal speed. These were characteristics they associated with the divine. It's crucial to understand that the Egyptians didn't worship the cats themselves. Rather, they saw these animals as living, breathing vessels that the gods could choose to inhabit, earthly manifestations of divine power. While early feline deities existed, such as Mafdet, a protector against snakes, the cat became most famously associated with the goddess Bastet. Originally, Bastet was a formidable and dangerous deity depicted with the head of a lioness, much like the warrior goddess Sekhmet. In fact, the two were often seen as two sides of the same divine coin. Sekhmet represented the sun's scorching, destructive fury, while Bastet represented its gentle, life-giving warmth. As the domestic cat became a more common and beloved presence in Egyptian homes, Bastet's iconography softened. Around the 2nd millennium BC, her image transformed from the fearsome lioness into the familiar, elegant figure of a woman with the head of a domestic cat. This religious shift perfectly mirrored the cat's physical integration into the household. Bastet became the goddess of the home, fertility, joy, and the protector of women and children. She was a deity who could be understood by observing the family pet. Amulets bearing her image were worn for protection, especially during childbirth, bringing the power of a great goddess into the most intimate moments of life. Her cult reached its zenith at her sacred city of Bubastis in the Nile Delta. The Greek historian Herodotus, visiting in the 5th century, described her temple as a place of incredible beauty and the annual festival in her honor as the most joyous in all of Egypt. He wrote of barges packed with hundreds of thousands of pilgrims floating down the Nile, singing, dancing, and drinking wine in a massive, ecstatic celebration of this cat goddess. The cat's elevated status had profound real-world consequences, enshrined in both law and deeply held social custom. Throughout much of Egyptian history, the animal was protected by the state. Harming a cat was a serious crime, and slaying a cat even unintentionally would shorten your life significantly. The historian Diodorus Siculus, who visited Egypt in the 1st century BC, provided a stunning eyewitness account of this fervor. He described an incident where a Roman diplomat accidentally eliminated a cat. Despite the fact that Egypt was desperately trying to curry favor with the rising power of Rome, and even though the pharaoh himself sent officials to plead for the man's life, it was no use. An enraged mob gathered at the Roman's house, dragged him out, and eliminated him. This shocking event reveals that the reverence for cats wasn't just a doctrine of the priests, but a passionate grassroots belief that could even override political necessity. This devotion extended to the animal's death. Herodotus reported that when a family's pet cat died of natural causes, the entire household would enter a period of deep mourning. He even noted that they would shave off their eyebrows as a sign of their grief for their fallen cat. He also recounted the bizarre behavior of Egyptians during a house fire. He claimed they would neglect extinguishing the flames to form a human blockade to prevent a mother cat from going in to attempt to save her kittens in vain. Whether this is true, or just another one of Herodotus's stories, isn't known. The cat's sacred status was even weaponized, according to a later legend about the Battle of Pelusium in 525 BC. The story goes that the Persian king, Cambyses II, knowing of the Egyptians' devotion, had his soldiers carry cats and other sacred animals into battle. The Egyptian soldiers, horrified at the thought of harming the creatures, supposedly surrendered, choosing defeat over sacrilege. While likely an exaggeration, the tale underscores how deeply the cat's sanctity was ingrained in the Egyptian identity. Ancient historians could repeat this story, and others would accept that this level of extreme devotion to cats was a definite Egyptian cultural trait. For all the love and legal protection afforded to cats, their story has a deeply unsettling and contradictory chapter. The Egyptian belief in an eternal afterlife led to the widespread practice of mummification, and this included animals for several reasons. The most straightforward was the mummification of a beloved pet. Just as a pharaoh was buried with his treasures, a family might mummify their cat to ensure their cherished companion could join them in the next world. The discovery of a 2,000-year-old pet cemetery at the port of Berenice, where nearly 600 cats and dogs were buried with collars and other adornments, shows evidence of deep care. However, these lovingly prepared pets represent only a tiny fraction of the millions of cat mummies produced in ancient Egypt. The vast majority were part of a massive religious industry centered on votive offerings. Pilgrims flocking to temples, especially the great cult center of Bastet at Bubastis, would purchase a mummified cat to offer to the goddess as a physical prayer, a way to gain her favor. This incredible demand fueled a sprawling economy. Temples operated large-scale catteries, breeding cats not as pets, but as a crop to be harvested. Archaeological evidence from sites like Saqqara and Bubastis has uncovered vast catacombs containing staggering numbers of mummies. In the late 19th century, one such site yielded so many, an estimated 180,000, that they were shipped to England by the ton to be ground down into fertilizer of all things. And yeah, I'm just going to let that sink in for a second. Ancient mummified Egyptian cats were shipped to Victorian England as fertilizer. Scans of these cat mummies reveal a grim truth. Most were young cats, under 2 years old, that had been deliberately slain. This created a stark division. The illegal elimination of a cat in the street was a capital crime, but the ritualized sacrifice of a cat within a temple was a sacred act. The industry was so commercialized that archaeologists have even found fake cat mummies sold to pilgrims by unscrupulous con artists. Or perhaps I should say that these con artists were actually the good guys because their cat mummies were made of clay and wrapped into a cat form. The cat's exalted status persisted for thousands of years, enduring through changes in dynasty and even surviving the Greek Ptolemaic rule. The cult of Bastet was still immensely popular when Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire. But the animal's divine protection could not withstand the monumental ideological shift that was coming. The rise of Christianity brought a new worldview, one that was fundamentally at odds with the Egyptian pantheon of animal-headed gods. Beginning in the 4th century, a series of decrees by Christian Roman emperors, most notably Theodosius I, sought to eradicate paganism across the empire. These laws prohibited sacrifices, forbade visits to temples, and eventually ordered their destruction or conversion into churches. The attack was on the entire religious structure that had supported the cat's sacred status. With the closure of the temples of Bastet, the great festivals ceased, the priesthood was disbanded, and the vast mummification industry collapsed. By the 5th century, the old gods had been officially silenced, and the cat's divine aura was stripped away by imperial decree.